So today, as I was just saying, we're going to go a little bit off-road and look at some material there's three topics. Actually, is it three or two? I'm trying to remember. I have dealing with insured property, triage with a ventilator in halacha, which we're going to see inside in the Imrei Yaakov, and then saving the life of someone who wishes to commit suicide. Okay, and these are all things that are relevant to the halachas that, so maybe I will bring up the Imrei Yaakov before we get into this. And let me just share my screen. Last week, one of the things, hi, good morning. Last week, I see we have some more people online today because I guess are people being more cautious because of Omicron? Is that the reason? I'm just curious.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Brian. Okay. Okay. So I'm just trying to see in the Likutim. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the previous page, which is on the previous. Okay. So one of the things that we saw, one of the last things that we saw, we saw that if someone's life is in danger, you have an obligation to save their life. But we saw that if there's a huge amount of money that needs to be spent, you're only obligated to spend huge amounts of money if you're the only person who can save him. But let's say a community can pitch in. So it's then up to the discretion of the community leaders to assess people as to what, everyone needs to contribute. But no one individual needs to take that burden upon themselves. We talked about, this was what we were up to. Trumat Dam, we saw this, this was the last thing that we saw. Which was about extracting blood from a patient in order to take out certain healthy cells. He says there's a tshuva, which we're not going to see. But then he has something this was where we left off on Friday. Okay, you have a ventilator, and it's the only one left in the hospital. Okay, this is talking about the halachas of triage, because we're talking about the mitzvah to save lives. Would you be allowed to remove the ventilator from one patient who's terminal in order to attach it to another patient whose life needs to be saved? Let's say, this is extremely relevant in today's world of COVID. This was a real tshuva a year ago when ventilators were in scarce supply because of the run on ventilators for COVID patients. And the question was, okay, so you've got a guy who's terminal, end of life, in their 90s. Family has requested for the patient to be on the ventilator to sustain the patient for, let's say, an extra couple of weeks or days. And you've got a guy with COVID who comes in, a 50-something-year-old man or woman, and needs to be able to breathe so that they can recover from the disease. And if not, they'll die from suffocation. But their prognosis is that as long as they can fight the disease, they'll live another 20, 30 years, right? So the question is, what do you do? So we're going to take a look inside a tshuva for that. And the next thing I wanted to see is Tovea Bayam. If you see a guy drowning in the ocean, you have a mitzvah to try and save them as long as you're not endangering your life significantly. And then he says, Im echad me'abed atzmo leda'at v'yachol acher lahatzilo, yesh omrim de'ino muzhar al zeh. So we're going to talk about this as well. Person is committing suicide. Guy jumps off the bridge, and you have the ability to fish them out of the water. Are you obligated to do that? Are you obligated to save a person's life who's willfully committing suicide? Some say that you're not commanded to save them, because if that person is abdicating their life, then it's not up to you. It's basically their decision, and you're not obligated to risk your life in any way, to take any risks, even mild risks, in order to save them. Lo mi baya da al ha'aseh de ha'shevoso l'rabo savedas gufo enu mitzuva dahavi kaveda midas. And he says, look, there's two commandments. One is v'hashevoso, return a person's lost object, which we learned is the mitzvah's aseh, to teach us that you are obligated to, if you're obligated to return someone's lost object, then kal v'chomer, you're obligated to return someone's life. So if you're going to learn it from that pasuk, then think about it. What if a person willfully throws away something? Do you have an obligation to return it to them? A person discards an object of value, knowing, let's say, I say, I don't want this anymore. I'm tossing it out. I'm putting it in my trash bin. You don't have an obligation of hashava saveda. So the same argument goes if a person is throwing away their life. According to this opinion, you don't have an obligation to return it to them. Ela af al halav eno musar. But not only that, but the mitzvah of lo saman al dam re'echa, some argue that you don't have an obligation. The yesh cholkim and others argue. Now, what is the basis of this machlokas? So we're going to take a look at that as well. So we have a number of topics. The two topics that we just discussed are, what do you do in cases of triage, when you have the opportunity to save a life, but you have to compromise on someone else's life in the process? And number two, is there a mitzvah of saving a person who wishes to commit suicide? And then the third topic, which we're going to see first, is something that we referenced last week, which I said I was looking for a brief synopsis, which is, what is the obligation of compensation when the person has insurance? What is your obligation to compensate someone who you've damaged? Either you've damaged their person or their property, if they are insured. And it's very complex. I have to tell you that I've seen, in doing just a little bit of research on this one question, there are literally books, sfarim, whole sfarim, that are devoted to this topic. Now, why are there literally sfarim that are devoted to this topic? Because there are a number of corollary questions that come up as based on this question. So, for example, let's say I don't pay the guy, but the insurance company now comes after me to pay. Okay, so his insurance covers him, and then the insurance company goes ahead and sues me as the injuring party. Am I allowed to fight against the insurance company? Or do I have an obligation to pay the insurance company? What if, what do you do with deductible? What do you do if I pay him and then the insurance pays him? Does he have an obligation to give me back some of my money? Or does he have an obligation to refuse the insurance company's payment? So there's so many different permutations going on over here. What if I rent a car, okay, and a guy crashes into me? What is his level of obligation if it's a car rental? There was just a Seinfeld episode about a car rental that I just saw. Anyway, made me think about it. So, okay. So we're going to see a lot of this stuff today. So I'll stop the share here, and I'm going to share my screen with another thing. There. Okay. So this was some of the stuff that I was looking up. So I finally found a good synopsis, which we're going to see now. Let's see here. Here we go. Dealing with insured property. This is from a contemporary sefer, which is just providing an introduction to Maseches Bava Kama. And he brings down the different shitos in how to deal with what is the obligation of the mazik, of the damaging party, when the victim is insured. Okay, it's from a sefer called Vizel Lashona. Kisherechush hanizak mivutach, when the property of the victim is insured. Kosav b'shailus teshuvas mahar sham. This is, I believe, one of the Talmidim of I believe a Talmud of the Chasam Sofer, but he's from the 19th century. Misha saraf beis chavero shahaya isikirirat. I'm not sure what language that is. It's probably some either Polish or maybe Russian language. But if I burn down my friend's house that was insured, mivutach, b'shol mulo bale habituach ba'ad beso shenisra, and the insurance company paid him for the fire damage. Im chayev hasorif l'shalem lo, is the guy who was responsible for the fire obligated to pay? V'hasorif toein halo lo garamti lecha hezek. So the mazik is arguing, I didn't cause you any damage because you've been made whole financially. And the insured party is saying, no, you still have to pay. Your insurance company is not paying me for damage. They're paying me because when you purchase insurance, it's like gambling. The insurance company gambles and you gamble. The insurance company is hoping that your premiums that you pay will be more than what they're going to have to pay you if you experience fire. And you're hoping that the premiums that you pay will help cover the cost of damage that occurs through fire, if God forbid it happens. So it's basically a financial exchange between you and the insurance company. It has nothing to do, at least the argument goes, it has nothing to do with the guy who caused the damage. He should still have to pay. That's a good argument, right? The argument is, look, I've been paying, we all pay for fire insurance. I think it's law. You have to purchase fire insurance for your home, right? So we all shell out. We've paid thousands upon thousands of dollars over the years for fire insurance. So if, God forbid, our house were to burn down, the insurance company would still get a lot of money from us. And when you take it into its aggregate, the insurance company is making huge amounts of money for people who pay out for things that are likely never to happen to any one individual, right? Ba'od al kolpana mechuyev l'shalom labali iskaritzian demei hahezek b'yuchalhu l'tava'o u'chahad nimtza haganav mishalim kefil l'shomer k'de'isa bereish perak hamafged ad kan devara. And furthermore, we should argue that the mazik should have to pay to the insurance company. Let him pay the insurance company what the insurance company has shelled out, and then the mazik can claim it against, or let the mazik claim it against the guy who was insured. In other words, I paid out all of this money to your insurance company. Give me back the money that I paid out to the insurance company, at least, right? Or however it's going to work. Udivarav timuhim tahasa mishum deshilim shomer benasa kehikna haba'olim l'shomer. He brings an example for that, but it's really not analogous, and so some question that analogy. We're not going to go into that citation right now, but I just wanted to show you that the two sides of the question. Okay. In other words, there is a case in the Gemara where a guy is a shomer, and you have someone who steals from a shomer. So the ganav has to pay double, and the shomer is the one who gets the kefil, because a ganav has to pay kefil, has to pay double. So he pays it to the shomer, and so whoever is the responsible party, the insurance company is the responsible party. The argument goes, and so the mazik should have to at least pay the insurance company. Okay, ulam b'shailos teshuvos hare b'samim kosav b'kevin she'en labalabayis hezek eno yochol litvo mechavero nizkei esh. So the Sefer Hare B'Samim is of the opinion that since the balabayis is not really damaged as a result of the fire because he gets fully compensated, he does not have the ability to make a claim against his friend who caused the fire. Omnam ze barur im ein habayit mevutach kol kach kifi she'ala hanezek bevadai mechuyav bal ha'esh lahashlim lo hamotar. But one thing he says is clear: if the amount of damage exceeds the amount that the insurance company is going to pay. So let's say, for example, there's a deductible, or that there's a cap on how much the insurance company will shell out. So then the mazik has to pay that difference. That's for sure. Mishum da'amrlei habalabayis ishatakt v'ilo ahadrinach lebale ha'as sekorenin behem yiklu etzlecha kol hanezek shenigram lahem v'pshiatecha. That the balabayis can say to the mazik, ish shatakt. He says, if you want, I'm not sure what it means, ish shatakt. Maybe you'll be silent, and if not, you better be quiet and pay me. But if not, I will hand you over to the fire insurance company, and they will sue you for the entire amount. In other words, the insurance company is going to pay me. I'm not going to tell them who's the responsible party, because usually for fire insurance, it's a no-fault insurance, right? So they basically tells the guy, you better pay me whatever you owe me that exceeds what the insurance policy was paying, because if not, I will turn you over to the insurance company and say that it's your fault that I had all of this damage. So certainly so in the Sefer Hare B'Samim says you're only entitled to collect from the damager the excess amount that the insurance company is not willing to pay for. Then we have Uvishailos Uchuvas Chelkas Yoav Kasav. Again, these are all, I believe, 19th century poskim, when insurance became a thing. He says, Kasav hadavar taloi bahad dechiyav rachmana mazik mamon chavero mikra dibmakei behima yishalamena. So he writes that it all depends on how you interpret the pasuk in the Torah when it says that he who strikes a friend's animal must pay. Eicha perush. How do you understand the pasuk when it says that he who damages must pay? Ha'im hu rak machmas hefsid haba'olim, o af im ein haba'olim mafsidim gzeres ha'kasavu demishalim shivoy ha'chayfetz mashashavelim kor. He says, how do you understand the pasuk? Is the meaning, is the import of the pasuk that because the owner of the animal experienced loss, you have to make up that loss? Or when the Torah says umakei behima yishalamena, does it mean that it's a biblical commandment that when you damage, it's punitive? When you damage, you must pay, regardless of whether the nizik is out of pocket or not. He says, "Ulefi aniyas daiti barur digzeres hakasav demazik chayev shivoy hadavar af shelo hifsid lahaba olim klal." And his conclusion is that even if the guy loses nothing, you still have an obligation to pay him. And I think the illustration that he gives, if I'm not mistaken, let's say you go ahead and you crash my car, you damage my car, and I have a rich uncle, and my rich uncle says, I've wanted to buy you a new Tesla anyway, so let's just forget about it. Junk the old car. I'm going to get you a car anyway. So does that mean that the mazik can say, well, your rich uncle bought you a car. What are you coming to me for? You know. So the answer is, what do you mean? What am I coming to you? You're responsible for damage. You pay for the damage. It's the same argument. It says, like, if the insurance company covers me, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. And so therefore, there is an obligation for you to pay for what you damaged, regardless of what my financial status is or how privileged I may be, that I can just get another car. Okay, so it's the same argument with the insurance. The obligation for a mazik to pay is independent of how much the nizik, the victim, needs those funds in order to be able to be compensated and to make him whole. Okay, so that's a counter argument. So we have the first opinion that we've seen is that is from the Maharsham, is that you have to pay because the payment that a nizik gets from an insurance company is not to cover your damage, but is rather to pay him back for the premiums that he's been paying in this gambling exchange between the house and the gambler, right? It's the same thing as the relationship between the insurance company and the homeowner, right? It's basically like who's going to win? Does the house win or does the gambler win? And in the case of where a person's house burns down, it's the gambler who wins because he basically gets more than he's paid out in premiums from the insurance company. And that's the basis for him being able to collect, not because of, and it's got nothing to do with the mazik. So the mazik has to pay independently. Sefer Hare B'Samim disagrees. And he says that the mazik does not have to pay since a guy is being covered for his damage. He only has to cover the deductible and any excess damage that the policy did not cover. Chelkas Yoav says that it depends on how you interpret the pasuk, and his interpretation of the pasuk is that it makes no difference whether the nizik needs the money to make him whole or not. The Torah obligates a person who's mazik to pay. And then he brings from the Or Sameach, and he says, Kosav, Nishalti be'echad shesachar bayit mechavero, v'kibel olav achrayis midaleka, v'achar kach holach hamaskir v'hivtiach beso b'chevrat ha'achrayut v'nisrafa habayit. I got a shaila from a guy who rents a house. He accepts upon himself a full financial responsibility for the house that he's renting. He then goes ahead and purchases an insurance policy to cover him if any damage occurs to the house, and then the house burns down. And so who's obligated? The renter is obligated to pay the owner, the homeowner, the kamochen. I'm sorry, not the renter bought the insurance policy, but the owner of the house purchased an insurance policy for fire. So, but nonetheless, the renter still has to pay. The chamochen shaninu, the shotaf nohar chamoro v'chamor chavero, v'im omar lo, ani atzilet shelcha ve'atanotin li et sheli, chayav litain lo. So the Gemara gives a case from the Gemara. The Gemara says that if a river washes away Ruvain's donkey and Shimon's donkey, and Shimon says to Ruvain, I can save your donkey as long as you pay me for the cost of my donkey, because I won't be able to save both animals. But if you pay for my donkey, I'll save your donkey. So Ruvain says, okay. So, and that's the halacha, that Ruvain has to pay Shimon the cost of his donkey. So, Ba'amine Rav Kahana Mirav, Yorad Lahatzil, Va'ala Shalo, Me'elav Mahu. So now what would happen if Shimon goes ahead and saves Ruvain's donkey? Ruvain has committed because Shimon is saving his donkey, Reuven has committed to Shimon that he will pay for the cost of his lost donkey. What happens if miraculously Shimon's donkey survives the river flow and is able to save itself? Does Reuven still have to now pay Shimon for the cost of the donkey because he's agreed to pay him if Shimon will go to the effort of saving Reuven's donkey? So Amarle Mishamaya Rechimu Allah. So Rav answered that yes, you know what? Reuven will still have to pay Shimon for the cost of his donkey in that case, because Shimon got a gift from heaven. Basically, the argument is Shimon can say to Reuven, you and I had a contract, you entered into a contract that you would pay for the cost of my donkey without any stipulation that whatever happens. We basically agreed that my donkey's worth, your donkey is much more valuable than mine. So I'm willing to save your donkey, but you still have to pay me the $500 for the loss of my donkey. The assumption is the donkey was going to die, but that's not what the argument that Rav made was just the opposite. You agreed you would pay for the cost of my donkey. And even if my donkey survives, Rav said, that's a gift from heaven. Yeah. And so God gave me that donkey. You still have to pay. So Alma, dahad dekibel achrayas mishum demachmas dematzil shel chavero mapsid chamor shel atzmo. And basically, Reuven's indebtedness to Shimon was generated as a result of Reuven's gratitude for Shimon's willingness to sacrifice his own property in order to save Reuven's property. Ulasof lo hifsid eshel atzmo da Allah me'elav. But in the end, Shimon's property was not lost, right? It miraculously survived. Lo matzi omar adaita da lo mechayavna nafshoy be'achrayas chamorcha. That Reuven does not have a right now to turn around and say that I wasn't prepared to pay you if your donkey would survive. The matzi omar le my ichpas lach bamed mishmaya rachimu alai. Because Shimon can say to Reuven, what difference does it make to you if my donkey survives or not? Your willingness to pay me for my donkey was based on your gratitude that I was going to save your donkey. In other words, your willingness to pay me the $500 was because I was going to save your donkey, which is worth $1,000 from complete damage. That was your willingness to pay. You entered into a contract with me that you'll pay me for the value of my donkey. And it doesn't matter, therefore, that my donkey is survived or not. So kol shekain kan. So therefore, create the analogy over here. Sha'al yedei ma shenotein schar katzavto lechevrat ha'achrayut hirviach b'tashlumei beisa. That if a guy takes out a fire insurance policy to a company that will cover him, he is able to recoup all of his losses from the fire, but vadai de bazelo niftar hasocher mitashlumi achrayas shekibel alav. But the renter still has a responsibility. He made a commitment that if your house burns down or sustains damage, I will pay for it, and that's independent of whether or not the guy loses the house or not. When damage occurs, I will pay you. And based on the Gemara, that is based on a contract that is independent of whether or not the homeowner is made whole through some other source. You promise to pay for any and all damage. Ba'od aylin b'shailas tshuva shoyel meishiv mahari halevi u'b'shailas tshuvas minchas yitzchak. There's so many other things that we could cover on this topic. It's almost endless. I mean, we could literally spend weeks going through all of the material that is on this topic. I mean, I was just doing some cursory research yesterday, and there's mountains of literature on this topic. But what you basically see over here is a variety of different opinions, but most of them lean towards the side. It seems that most of them lean towards the side that the damager still has liability, even if the insurance company is willing to pay. But because there's a difference of opinion in the latter poskim, it'll always come down to Amotse mechavero olav haraya. He who wishes to extract the funds has to bring absolute proof. And if the mazik says, hey, I want to paskin like the Chelkas Yoav, and the Chelkas Yoav says, I only have to pay you anything that the insurance company doesn't cover you for, he can say that. You say, well, look at the Or Sameach, look at the Hare B'Samim, look at the Mahar Sham, look at da 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 da. So, okay, so you paskin like them, I paskin like the Chelkas Yoav. And the Chelkas Yoav says that I only have to pay you what was not covered by your policy. So,
All right, can I throw something very quickly into the mix? And I don't know how it
so
stands legally.
I'll tell you what. Let's hold the
Tomorrow?
questions for tomorrow because it's
Okay.
already 6:41,
Yep.
and then we'll continue the conversation
I'll
tomorrow.
just say one word, and that's subrogation. We can talk about it tomorrow.
Subrogation.
Yeah. And because insurers can go after the third party that causes damage to reclaim what they paid.
Okay. So all right, we'll talk about it tomorrow.
That compounds issues even more.
Yeah, correct.